Hello and welcome to our official. Is it going?
It's going. It says we're live.
All right, sure. Hello and welcome to our official test run of Bleeding Cool's newest feature, The Bleed, with Erik Grove, myself, Joseph Schmidt, and David Dissanayake. Before we get started, I guess I should tell you a little bit about The Bleed and what we're doing here. We really like comics, and we like talking about comics, and we really just want to bring the discussion to you. And right now, we're gonna talk about one of a graphic novels that we read that we really liked, and this is how it's gonna go. First, we're gonna share something that we're all excited about, like a bit of news that broke this week, or an issue that we've just read and loved, and that we just really want to share with you guys why we liked it and why we think it's a great comic. And we might have some bona fide creators sitting with us once a week, in which case we'll talk to them about their work. And lastly, but definitely not least, the book club. And each week we're gonna sit down and we're gonna talk about trades that we like, whether it's an arc, a graphic novel, what have you. We're gonna sit and talk about that book in depth and why we liked it, what we didn't like about it, what we really enjoyed about the artwork, the coloring, the writing, anything that we really enjoyed. We're just going to lay it all out there. It's nothing complicated or fancy. You're just geeking out about comics. This week we're going to be talking about New Avengers, Volume 1, Everything Dies by Jonathan Hickman, Steve Epting, Rick Magyar, Frank Darmada, and Joe Carmagna. But first, we're going to get to that bit of news that we liked. Erik, what did you like that?
Yeah, it seems like the big news in comic books, but more than just comics, is the sort of the big success of Guardians of the Galaxy over the weekend. The sort of the growing industry around comic book movies, particularly less traditional or marquee characters. I mean, there's also the announcement today of DC doing, or Warner Brothers doing, I think, what is it, like 30 movies every 20 minutes for the next 10 years? So that's kind of, those are the things that I think are going to have the biggest impact on comics and even pop culture. I mean, we're rapidly moving into a point where there are going to be 2 Marvel movies, 2 Warner Brothers movies, maybe an X-Men movie, maybe a Fantastic Four movie, maybe a Spider-Man movie every year. We could end up with at least 6 big budget superhero movies in a year. That's insane to me when you think about how few and far between they used to be when I was growing up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember being so excited when Batman and Robin came out,
Right.
buying toys and stuff. So yeah, this is kind of you wouldn't really have expected it. You wouldn't have really expected something like Guardians of the Galaxy to do as well as it did. But I mean, it was a good movie. It reminded me of The Fifth Element almost, and that's kind of why I really liked it.
Mm-hmm.
It was a great film. It's surprising. I guess it stands contrary to the traditional wisdom that in order to be a successful franchise film, you need big name recognition. And Guardians of the Galaxy did not have that, and has created that for itself. I think that the movie is actually going to affect the comics more than the comics affected the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Guardians of the Galaxy. I thought it was really impressive what James Gunn did. He fit so much into that hour and 3/4 or whatever it was. The cast was amazing. Chris Pratt was excellent. I'm really happy that he's doing so well with this franchise too. As a comics retailer, one of my day jobs is working at Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco here, and this past weekend we sold through the majority of our Guardians trades, which was awesome. And generally, you don't see too much of that with superhero movies. You see it a little more with books like Kick-Ass, or we've been selling through Kingsman. The same with happened with Scott Pilgrim too when that happened. But it was good to see the the success for the movie translating into people coming and checking out Guardians of the Galaxy, which was awesome. So yeah, I'm happy all around. It's a good thing for pop culture. It's a good thing for comics. It's great.
And what did you? Oh,
Sorry, talked over you, Joe. Go ahead.
What? No, you. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I wonder if that interest is because there's not already a saturation of those properties with comic fans. Like, if comic fans run out to get the Guardians of the Galaxy comics because they hadn't been getting them, but you don't see that so much when a new X-Men movie comes out because that's already been very popular.
Yep. Well, there's an interesting point that was brought up by Mark Miller. I still don't know how you properly pronounce his name. He had this point that when a superhero movie comes out, you don't see the movie translated to comic sales generally because there is such like a massive amount of different, say, Batman comics for people to go see when they get into a comic shop, and nobody knows what's a good thing. A lot of times people will just pick a random one, and it could be some terrible comic, some just crap Batman series from whenever. But when you have a book like Kick-Ass, or a movie like Kick-Ass, there's only one thing to get. There's no question of the quality there. Everyone knows exactly what they're going. The same thing with Scott Pilgrim. When that movie came out, like the sales for the book like quadrupled on like the aggregate scale. So I think there's a lot to be said of having comic movies being made out of singular graphic novels or singular series, as opposed to something like Batman or X-Men or something like that.
How did Winter Soldier trades do when Winter Soldier came out? Like when a particular story is the feature of the movie?
For us, not very well. Nobody really. I think maybe like a couple of sales. We bought a whole bunch, and we still have some of them left. I think Marvel dropped the ball a little bit on not having a good series that was still like an ongoing series, or they had that Rick Remender thing, but that wasn't really a Winter Soldier story in line with the movie. It was more of a Shield story. Anyway, but yeah, there just wasn't the same amount of interest as there was with Guardians. And I know Guardians is kind of an exception to that rule because there are a lot of different Guardians books, and not all of them are very good. But I think Marvel did a big push behind the Bendis stuff, and the Bendis stuff is good. It's not my favorite, but it holds up. And it's a good book to get people into that universe. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just how bizarre Guardians was, and that it wasn't a staple, like you said. That was just this weird little franchise that no one really knew about until now, and everyone all of a sudden wants to check it out. Well, everyone knows what the X-Men is, or who they are, and what Batman, and et cetera, et cetera. So
that's true. Well, what piece of news came out that caught your eye this week, David?
I thought it was interesting that Warner Brothers just announced the 10 new films from between now and 2020. I wonder if perhaps they missed the train, if by the time all this stuff starts coming out, if people will sort of be tired of superheroes. And it's a big gamble, I think, the studios, both Marvel or Disney and Warner Brothers are doing, planning out so many movies. Because the superhero things, they're cool now, but how long exactly will this last? I don't know. I hope it continues to last, but another 6 years worth of films and how many billions of dollars it's going to go into them, that's a big risk. I wonder if there's an upper limit where people just won't want to go see the next Iron Man movie or the next Avengers or Justice League or whatever. But it's cool. I mean, it shows that Warner Brothers has faith in their whatever team they have moving behind the scenes, and I know that people like Kevin Smith and have been involved tangentially. It's really Zack Snyder, it seems like, is their go-to director at least, but we'll see. So that's a piece of news. I guess what I've been reading that I've been really liking. At San Diego, I picked up the full run of Joe Casey and Jose Ladron's Cable run from the 90s that hasn't been collected. I've been looking for that for years, and I finally found them all, and I just read through them, and it's so good. It's just really exciting. It's sort of like typical 90s superhero stuff, just like the tone and stuff, and it's not quite as deep as some of Joe Casey's later work. But it's interesting to see Jose Ladron's earlier stuff, and he was aping Jack Kirby, but he did it so well. And it was cool to see a kind of bombastic 90s book done right, And so that's what I've been reading.
Cool. Um, the news that caught my eye this week was, or I guess last week, was Jeff Johns tweeting out something about the Dark Side War, and I'm I follow quite a few DC books, but like I mean, none of them get me as excited as Jeff Johns. I mean, call me a fanboy, but he just does the Justice League pretty well if you can take it in its decompressed run. You know, how it's totally stretched out. But reading it from the beginning and kind of knowing what's going on with Forever Evil and with what he's building up, it got me really excited to see that the Anti-Monitor and all this stuff with Earth 2 and the future Earth and Mr. Terrific building Brother Eye, that it's all kind of coming to this, well, I don't know, maybe like a crescendo, you know? And I really got excited that Darkseid is the center of all of it, just because he's such a good villain when used right. And you know, say what you will about the New 52 and its treatment of kind of retreading ground, I feel like this approach to Darkseid, while not original, is still something that is something unique. You know, it's something different, and I mean, no, not unique. I'm sorry. It's not. It's just a very interesting take in the New 52 that they built. They spent this long building him up. He comes in, kicks ass, breaks the door down, and then all of a sudden they're like, okay, let's build this threat up. Let's build this threat up. And now it's coming to a head with him and the Anti-Monitor and this big Earth War. So I'm excited about that.
Cool. Yeah, I haven't actually been reading. I read the first arc of Justice League right when the New 52 was launched, but I haven't read through it. I'll be honest, I wasn't really impressed. I didn't really follow through with it, but you know, I did love what Jeff Johns did with the Green Lantern, and even before that, his stuff on the Flash. You know, that I love that stuff, and you know, I have faith in him. You know, I'm not a big fan of the New 52 in general, but I would like to go back and reread through some of the Justice League stuff, because that seems like the central book in all of the New 52 and the one that's worth reading out of the main books. You know.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's at this point it's just the little reference to it in the tweet, right? There's nothing else kind of solid. I mean, is there even a vague schedule notion? Is it like next summer?
No, he hasn't said anything. But the end of Forever Evil with the Anti-Monitor coming in and his herald saying, "I'll find another world for you to destroy."
Spoilers.
You're gonna read it.
Warn people.
You read the first arc of Justice League, and it's like 30 issues. Come on. You can't get mad. It's like getting mad about spoiling Lost or something, or Breaking Bad. A little bit more relevant. Yeah, you've heard of that by now, hopefully.
Yeah.
But
we're not going to be spoiling Lost here, are we? Cause...
or Breaking Bad. We're not spoiling anything. Spoiler show.
Yeah, I haven't seen Breaking Bad yet. I haven't finished it, so please. Lost is, you can spoil that. That's fine. But not Breaking Bad, man. Don't do that.
No, but he hasn't said anything about when it's coming out, but it feels like it's building to something. In the first arc of Justice League, and even the Aquaman arc, which I think was the second arc, they were really only good for the character development. Like the conflict, like I said, Darkseid just kicks the door down, and then he's beating the shit out of the Justice League, and they barely win. They find that that he's hunting Supermans down, and that's pretty much it. And they haven't really done anything except for glimpses into what like characters from Batman, Superman, and the Villains Month stuff, but they've more like been building them like this big threat behind the scenes, and it's rare to see that nowadays, because you don't see guys on comics for a long time like you do, like Jeff Johns and Jonathan Hickman building long stories. So it's just really cool to see the long game being played.
Yeah. Speaking of long threats that are building up over time, we should get into New Avengers.
Yes, we definitely.
I just reread. I have all the issues, but I reread in preparation for this. I went and bought the trade to reread through it. And there's a lot going on that I had forgotten about, actually, and I'm eager to get into it.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get talking about this, just because it's an intricate arc. Or not really intricate, but it's, as far as superheroics go, it's pretty good stuff. And so, yeah, let's get into talking about New Avengers by Jonathan Hickman, Steve Epting, and then how do I say? Is it Rick Magyar or Magar? I don't know.
I'm not sure.
His name.
I don't know how you
Frank
pronounce
Romana
it.
and Joe
Let's
Carnahan.
pronounce it every way we can, and then somebody will correct us and tell us that we did it wrong.
Yeah, probably the creator. He probably won't take it away.
I feel really bad for creators that have names that are not instantly common, you know.
Yeah.
Like Mark Miller. I pronounced it Mark Millar for years and years and years, and then I think I saw something where he said, "Nope, it's actually Miller. That's just the way we spell it in the UK."
Yeah. All right. Mark Miller it is.
I think you know, he can correct me on that. But yeah.
Oh yeah. That would be something. That would be something that I could believe in. Yeah, but why don't you get Eric get us started about I guess your initial thoughts about it, and we can go from there and go into detail about what we liked. Eric, you want to go?
Yeah, sure. So you know, I hadn't you know, just like David, I hadn't reread the first 6 issues in a while, and I did reread them in anticipation of this. So there were a couple of things that were surprising to me on reread. That's actually, it's what was surprising to me initially was how much planning must have gone into the last, you know, years of the Avengers stories, because there's reference in like those first 6 issues to, what is it, time runs out. Like there's a specific line that comes from the Black Swan early on. She says, well, you'll see when time runs out. And that's the name of the big crossover story that hasn't even started, or I don't know if it's crossover story, but the new storyline that's going to be in New Avengers and Avengers coming up. So already seated at that point, at the very beginning, you know, 20 issues back, I was sort of surprised to see that level of organization. I guess I shouldn't have been, considering the way that the Hickman tends to plot out his stuff. But you know, things like that and other little references to more recent stories that I don't imagine a lot of people picked up on and said, oh, you know what, this one throwaway line, this is going to be a big event in 3 years. But it's worth it to go back and look at that, because you see the foundation that's being built that maybe doesn't necessarily make sense or resonate the same way when you started on the first read. But when you go back and look at it, it's oh, I see what he's doing here. That's when you really get to see the sort of the meticulous planning that's involved, from even just the symbol. You know, I having read the first issue of New Avengers, there's the character of gosh, I'm drawing a blank here. The what's his name? Manifold. There's a Manifold that shows up from another universe.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that's the same character as one of the characters that he's put on the Avengers. But I didn't draw that connection on the first read. And even the symbol is the same, and there's a little reference. Oh, Manifolds can only operate within the same universe. So I didn't really talk about what it's about, I suppose, but I just kind of started off by talking about maybe the value of reading it once and then going back and reading it again.
Mm-hmm.
To see the sort of the work.
Yeah. Hickman's notorious for plotting things out well in advance. I remember when they first announced that he was going to be on Avengers and New Avengers, there was an interview where he said that he had already completed like the full, 60 to 100 issue map of what he was going to do, and he said he pitched the whole story as one thing. And as soon as I heard that, I was in. It's like, all right, let's do this. And it is really impressive, and I really appreciate writers who write for rereadability, that take the more novelistic approach. And it's a difficult line to walk in comics, because at the same time, like comics is a monthly game, and it's hard to walk that line between making a single issue something that is going to satisfy someone month after month and keep them coming back, because at any time people can just drop out of the series. Yet at the same time, like, make it so intricate that it all holds up when collected together as one. And some writers fail at that. That's the reality. And Hickman doesn't. I know Hickman has his detractors, but I think masterful modern writer, at least the writer of this generation, of his generation. There's other people. Kieran Gillen's is another one that's come up with him. Just sort of like this new tier of Marvel, Jason Aaron, all those kind of guys, Rip Remender. And rereading this issue just sort of drove that home. And I knew going into this, like, as soon as I read the first couple issues as they were coming out monthly, I was like, there's a lot going on here. There's a lot that they're not picking up to. There's all sorts of illusions, and that's great. I loved going back and seeing them all again.
Yeah, it was. I remember when the series was announced, I was really excited that there was going to be an ongoing about the Illuminati in their present day ongoings, because it was really interesting. I didn't really read Marvel at the time when Secret War and the Illuminati were really established, but I really like a lot of these characters, and I really like the idea of them hanging out together and doing morally ambiguous things. And going back and reading it, just like you guys said, this is something that is rewarding on a second read. You do catch the little things like time runs out. I saw that same thing. It was really kind of like, oh man, did he mean to do that, or was it just a phrase that kept recurring in his head? And the way I was following Avengers versus X-Men at the time very intently as a huge Cyclops fan, which probably says a lot about me. I freaking love Cyclops. And so, I mean, and I think Cyclops taught me how to not care about what happens to your characters, because to your characters, but to the characters that you like and that you're fans of, because it's so easy to get mad about some stupid development that happens, but it's just a stepping stone. You don't like it, just hold on and keep your eye on the prize, and it'll become something that you like it. I mean, and that taught me to give way, to what's going on. So the way that they're treating these characters who are normally so, pure, except for Namor, fucking Namor. But they're all like Reed Richards and Beast. I mean, they're normally kind of level-headed characters, even though Beast has done some dumbass stuff. And Black Panther is a very, noble character, and Doctor Strange and Captain America and Iron Man, they've all kind of done the morally ambiguous thing, but they're all good guys. And Black Bolt, I guess he was kind of the wild card, because I didn't really know too much about the Inhumans. But it was just really exciting to see all of these very prominent characters, pretty much the highest of their groups. And so it was really interesting to see the way that Hickman was going to play the long game, because like David said, he's notorious for doing that stuff, was from Secret Warriors to Fantastic Four, and even the S.H.I.E.L.D. stuff that he's done. It's all kind of built this larger story amongst it all, and it's really exciting to see it all kind of come together, and then rereading this and seeing the foundation that was laid for it. You really kind of see how the Illuminati set themselves up for failure from the beginning. And it's really interesting to go and look at that from that perspective.
Yeah, I liked. It's interesting reading the first 6 issues again after having read the rest, or at least what's come out so far, and the discussions that take place in those first couple of issues between the characters and them deciding on what path they're going to take in dealing with this going back to what you said about the characters, I really like how Hickman has rooted these guys in. I guess I want to say reality in a way. It's like they feel like real people almost, and like these are incredibly intelligent people who are a much higher level of power and intellect than than we would ever. But they sort of have their own little like ways of thinking about things that Hickman really brings out subtly at times, and the way that they bounce off of each other. Some are more obvious than others, like particularly with Black Panther and Namor dealing with each other after the war in AVX. And I know sometimes people bring that criticism of Hickman that like his stories are kind of dry and devoid of character work, and I wholeheartedly disagree. I mean, I could see maybe a little more with books like East of West or something like that. But with this, I think he has such an incredible hold of these characters. And you can see it in the subtlest of things when there's in that first couple of issues where they're sitting and Namor asks the question, this comes down to, are you willing to kill for our Earth, or are you willing to murder for your people or something? And that's the only thing that Black Bolt says in the entire first 6 issues is that little whisper, and you can barely see it in the text blocks, and he just says, "I would," and everyone sort of stops and looks at him, and there's like the rumble going on in the background.
Yeah, that part.
And then there's Captain America, who's like refusing to let them do this, despite the fact that there really are no other options on the table, and it speaks volumes then of Tony Stark, who then seems to be the mastermind behind the plan of brainwashing Cap. And you see how Beast and Reed sort of deal with these situations as scientists. There's a great line where it's Beast, Black Panther, and Reed Richards in the room in the lab where they're building those antimatter bombs for the incursions. And Reed says something to Beast, some of us appreciate using a scalpel more than swords, and Black Panther responds, and some of us don't have enough experience with swords. Like that sort of little subtle banter going between them, I think is great, and it really sort of roots these people in, like, they're believable, they're humans, and I really appreciate that.
So, I'm going to voice in some dissent here, not necessarily that I disagree with anything either of you were saying, but there are some things about the first volume that. So, from a critical point of view and from a creative point of view, I think it's an incredibly successful set of issues. I think he's the creative team sets out to tell a particular kind of story. They do a really good job on it. However, there are parts of the story that they're telling that I don't like. And I actually, I read the first 6 issues as it was being released, and I haven't kept current on New Avengers because there are components to the ongoing book that I read it and I say, wow, this is very well put together, and I like a lot of this, and I respect it greatly, but I don't enjoy it. And the reason that I don't enjoy it is because there is a certain sense of aloofness to the characters and to the storyline that I think really negatively impacts it. So, like, for example, while the individual characters are totally believable and they have these great little bits and lines of dialogue, Black Bolt talks about how he would murder to save his people, but you never see his people. Reed Richards talks about how he would do anything to protect his family, but you never see his family. You just have to sort of accept, okay, you have to a certain degree, you have to have read Marvel Comics for decades to appreciate how important Reed Richards' family is to Reed Richards. The same thing for Black Bolt and the Inhumans. I mean, if you pick up New Avengers #1 and it's your first Marvel book, you're out of luck because there's no character building for the backstory for these characters. There's no scenes where you see Reed Richards struggling with his decisions while he's with his family. You never see Beast struggle with the moral quandaries interacting with any people. In a way, it's like some of the criticisms you'll see of some of the big summer action movies. You never see the bystanders that get blown up. The cities get blown up. There's a lot of spectacle. It looks like a big deal, but there's no direct human face to the consequences. So in that first 6-issue arc, there are like 3 or 4 whole worlds that are completely obliterated. And never once do you have a real sense of these are people who died. These are billions of people that died. The characters talk about it and how important it is. And I see that the story that they're trying to tell is not necessarily focusing on that human element, but by not bringing that in at all, it really creates a distance for me between these characters that are, if you're going to have a story that's about the compromises that these great people make in order to save their family and their world, I want to see at least a little sense of their families and their world. It doesn't need to be a lot, but a little bit. And maybe it's just a scheduling issue. Maybe if they could put out 4 times as many issues in the same time period, those are the stories that end up on the cutting room floor. Maybe that's what's going on, but that's what I found as a reader that I constantly kind of bounced up against. I just kept reading it, thinking, what I'm missing is the real emotion. There's a I'm not picking up a sense of anguish, and even tying into that, the decision to remove Captain America from the Illuminati is an interesting beat in this story, and it's a very I remember when that came out. Rich Johnston, head writer, bleedingcool.com, made a point of running. He's made a point of running a story, talking about, hey, look at what just happened to Captain America. I mean, it was a noteworthy storyline for comics when it happened, and it was a good point. But when you took out the voice of dissent from the group, you ended up with at least as far as I've gotten, and this may be just again. I needed to read 6 or 8 more issues before I got to this, but at no point have I reached the point where there's any sense of regret or struggling. What I got was Reed Richards talking in technobabble about how he had to do everything he had to do to save the world, Tony Stark talking in technobabble about how he had to do everything he had to save the world, and that times 3 or 4 more characters. I didn't see any character that was showing any sense of this has to be done, but I don't want to do this. I never saw that grappling. I never saw that conflict. And to go 6 issues into a storyline without the character emotional connection, and to have to rely basically on these really heavy fight scenes and explosions that have gravity but don't have emotion, kind of ran me off of the book. I also.
That's a very fair criticism.
Can I have a response really quick?
Oh yeah, please. Everybody tell me why I'm wrong now.
So you're right. That moment was really important. But I see what you're saying about like there's no going back and forth, and it's not about like the emotional grappling with yourself of having to make these horrible decisions. But I think that's the point. I think taking Cap out of the picture was the point of no return. This isn't a book about having to struggle with yourself. This is a book about what happens after you make the decision, after you've already stepped into the abyss.
Very good point.
And what happens then? And I think that's what it was. That's why Cap was only in the first 2 issues or something, and then he's out. The voice of dissent is gone, and they have gone past the point of no return. And that gets echoed a lot of different times, especially with Black Panther when they kill the first world, and he stops for a second, and Namor says, "Oh, what did you lose your guts or whatever the line was?" And he said, "No, I'm just taking a moment to remember who I used to be." And then they destroy the world. And that line, that's like to me, that's the quintessential sort of note that resonates throughout the whole story. I think that's what it's about. It's a book about death. It's a book about blackness and like sacrificing your soul, and like you see that theme coming up again and again and again. You haven't read the rest of the issues, but that comes up with Doctor Strange when he. Well, all right, I won't go into spoilers. But
but I mean,
you've run the point. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
I was just as far as the first 6 issues, he has a point. I remember when they first came out, and I read it, but like I said, just like you said, reading along now, it becomes more apparent. But when it was coming out, I remember thinking that it, the gravity of it wasn't as impactful as they were saying it was. They had talked a lot about the multiverse collapsing, and all you saw in the beginning was another Earth and Black Panther punching out Black Swan as she blows it up, and you don't. I mean, you don't really see anything from there. She kills her companion, and Black Panther knocks out the other guys, and you don't really see why it should matter. They just tell you why it should matter. They tell you the multiverse is collapsing, and they tell you that because infinite timelines, if it was something easily solved, it should have been solved. But I see that criticism that as far as you have to be a Marvel Universe fan. You have to know that Namor is the king of Atlantis, and he has all these people, because you don't see, as much as they talk about their kingdoms, they don't mention their kingdom, except for the first issue. It would be a wonderful, I was thinking that earlier, is reading is that first issue would be a wonderful first issue to a Black Panther series.
Sure.
That would be a wonderful, because it makes you care about Wakandan, because you see the future of Wakanda die in his arms in that first issue. But
I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I mean, that's why I agree with that, and I kind of felt that at the time. I really liked the character development, and I just kind of was like letting it build. I guess that was like a pass for me, is letting the conflict build, because I really I trust Hickman. I'm a fan of his, and I liked what he was doing with this, like raising these moral questions. And so from that point, I was like, I'll we'll see if I care about it. And he does a good job later of making you care. He really does. For this first 6 issues.
I believe that. Yeah. I love the creators. I mean, the creators are superstar creators. They're spectacular.
Oh my God, his artwork.
I mean, yeah, Epting is on fire. I mean, Hickman is doing amazing work. The coloring, everything about the book is top notch. There's no faulting the quality of the material. I just, it would be hard for me to go to discuss it without saying, yeah, but somehow I didn't like it. So I love all the creators. I think it's a great work. I just still, that individual component, that individual piece of the story, I found myself reading it and kind of going, I kind of dislike all of these things. I don't know.
Yeah, it's fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, it is definitely a book that's rooted in the broader Marvel universe, and I think it would suffer as a work, and like if you were to give it, to put more of that, I don't know what you would call it, but grounding it more in like these characters' lives. If you put the rest of Reed Richards' family in, or you saw some more of the impact on the world and stuff. If you think about it, like this is sort of like the central piece of what Marvel is going to be doing. At least that's what Tom Brevoort said. Moving forward, it would be insanely difficult to do something like that in this book in particular. It's 22 pages a month, and it's got to be the backbone of everything. Like you don't have time or space. You don't have the real estate in a book like this anymore. Like maybe, and I wish it was like a 40-page a month thing, because that would be amazing. And I think the story would be probably better for it. But the bottom line is that there's no room, and you're right. It does suffer. But I guess as I'm deep in the Marvel universe. I read lots of the books, so I have that understanding of where all these characters are outside of this story and what it is. And that's another thing that I like about Hickman's run, is that there are all these like resonances in there to all the other things that are happening outside of New Avengers and these people's own individual books. That I think is really clever. And granted, you have to be reading them to understand what he's saying, but when you are reading them and you do see them, it's like, oh, yes! Like, it's cool to see the interconnection, and he does a good job with it. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that in. One thing that I like about Hickman, but some other people levy as a criticism against him is his dialogue and the way that he writes characters. Some people say that it's a little too cold, and that the way that people speak in these things is almost like too kind of poetic or too sort of machine-like. And I was thinking about that as I was going through and reading this. And I have to say it works for me. And I was curious what you guys thought about something like that. It's really like the way that these characters speak is almost in poetry. And there is sort of like a certain like fluid, deep, machine-like nature to them as they speak and as they narrate things. But I'm curious how that...
Definitely Shakespearean. I mean, it's got a very epic quality and a very, he doesn't have anybody say anything, just ums and ahs. I mean, whenever he has somebody talk, he's giving them little bits of speeches. He's paying very careful attention to what they're saying. I've never thought that the dialogue in Hickman's work was anything short of, perfectly suited for the story that he was telling, and in many cases hilarious. Like if you haven't read the Nightly News, that is one of the funniest comics in a really dark way, but it's a hilarious comic. And I think that his stuff is generally pretty funny, and has a lot of sort of comedy and banter to it, with some characters more than others. But New Avengers doesn't so much have that, and it has that gravitas. I do dig that. I think that's pretty cool. I can see why people might maybe, I don't know. I see that that's different from a lot of other comics, but I like it.
Mm-hmm.
There was one Captain America line that I thought that seems a little speechy. That was it. Like one line that I kind of had an issue with out of the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the dialogue, especially for those first 3 issues, there's a lot of those first 3 issues where it takes place in the City of the Dead, where they're in that, it's just black around them. You don't even see the room. You just see them sitting in blackness around a table. And that I feel like that there sets the scene for the Illuminati and what they're doing and why they're there, and everything in that room is serious. I mean, Tony Stark cuts a few jokes, to kind of lighten the mood, and even that goes out the window real quick once they kind of realize what they're dealing with, and
that opening page that they keep bringing back again and again in the series, where it's Reed Richards talking. The first line of the book is "Everything dies."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was. It just kind of, it really sets the stage for what they're dealing with, and I mean the artwork in it is superb. I mean Steve Epting is just great cinematic. He doesn't even, it's not that his work can be described as cinematic, but the quality of it is picturesque almost. Every character looks different. I mean, from Captain America's hardened chin to to Reed Richards with wrinkles on his temple, to Tony Stark with his cheekbones. Every character has this unique look to them, and they don't look the same. They don't have like a very similar look. And his layouts are pretty amazing, and they're pretty diverse. He does like Watchmen grid style. He does these big splash pages with intricate panel work, and I mean, the lettering also is top notch on it. I mean, the lettering whenever like a planet explodes and all the, like you said, it's a lot of action and a lot of big fight scenes. The lettering does a really good job. Oh, there's Indy. But the lettering does a lot of great work in setting, in indicating what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great, especially late in the later issues. I'm not sure if it's the same letter. Hang on, let me check. I was looking through some of the other issues that I just found on my shelf here, and I noticed I really like, for example, Black Swan Speaks and Black Bubbles.
Hey guys.
Oh, hey there.
Sorry I was late.
No, it's shit happens. David's gonna talk, but you carry on with your thoughts when he passes it to you.
Sounds good.
Sorry, I just wanted to see if it was the same letter later in the series as well. This one, the first volume is Joe Manga. pieces. Yep,
from
yep, he
Universal
stays later.
Calligraphy.
Yeah, it's subtle. It's standard for the most part. But there's every once in a while there's some great things. Like later when you get onto like the Black Priests and stuff, they have like their weird alien language that they're speaking. I think that's amazing. As is like the map makers when you see them.
Yeah, it's all really well. It's all pretty intricate. And why don't you jump in? What did you tell us? What your thoughts were about this?
We're still talking New Avengers, right?
Yeah, that's what we're talking.
To be honest, I haven't really been a fan of the New Avengers series. I always said it was too much fake science. It gets really in depth on the science that's fake, and I'm just like, kind of losing me, guys. And I mean, I was rolling with it in the beginning, but then like they're in the alternate dimensions and they're fighting them, and like they told some whole stories like kind of starting there. Wait, that might be too far. Scratch what I just said about that. But it's just a lot of fake science. Like I really like this Black Swan character. I want to see what they're gonna do with her. And I think that's kind of an interesting premise. But yeah, I don't know. A lot of the fake science got me. I'm just finding it kind of convoluted. But I think all the Avengers books are like that right now. Super convoluted and that.
All of Hickman's stuff, or just Avengers?
Wait, what all is Hickman doing? He's got regular Avengers, New Avengers. Is Avengers World his?
Yeah, it started it, and then it spun off to. It's just Nick Spencer now.
Yeah, they're working on it together though. He's very in tune to what Hickman's doing. It's very much part of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, they co-wrote some issues of Avengers together too. For I think it was Infinity, right? Or like right before Infinity.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was with it all until Infinity, and then that's I think where they kind of dropped a couple of the balls in the Avengers storyline. I'm not really enjoying any of the books, but I'm reading them because it's Avengers.
I hate to say it, but Infinity, as much as I enjoyed it when it was coming out, it did kind of end up being a bit of a pause point for me. I know I'm going to go back and catch up on all of those comics, but as I kind of gave my little dissent before you joined us, I tend to agree. I think that the jargon in some of the books can get a little over much, and just kind of detaches a little bit. It becomes very cerebral, and cerebral is great, but again it distances from the emotional. So, but yeah, it is interesting that I think Infinity ended up being probably for not just us, but for some other readers, ended up being kind of like okay, let's maybe put this on pause. I wish that it hadn't been that way, because again, I love the creators. I love what they're doing conceptually, but it got a little hard to continue after Infinity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Infinity definitely. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. I'm late.
You back to the corner.
I loved Infinity up until the last issue, really. It felt. I mean, at first, I liked the idea of the dual threat. It felt like it should have just been about the builders. Then instead of like throwing Thanos in there, I think you could have done like a whole other thing with Thanos. And the Thanos, like what ended up happening to him at the end of Infinity was a little weak, I thought. It's like he just sort of got frozen for a little while, and that's clearly going to be a big point later on. They've already hinted at it in New Avengers. That Death is also frozen.
No, it wasn't Death. It was
his right Corvinus.
Yeah, it was one of the other guys. Because he was dying, like he was like turned into a skeleton, but he slowly healed.
That's what it was. And those Simone Bianchi issues they had, like it showed that like his body is like rebuilding itself inside of the inside of the thing.
That was what kind of I was pointing. What I said when we were first talking about it. The Illuminati are setting themselves up for failure story-wise. All they do is talk about how willing they are to do these evil things that they have to do.
They even Black Swan mentioned something. I didn't pick up on this in the first time I read through it. She says something in, I think it's that last issue, Black Swan says that like you've chosen one of 8 paths that have like been shown before, and there's like the 8th path is like leaving an Earth and colonizing another one. And she's like, you guys have experience with that. And Reed Richards is the only one who's like, wait, so there's other things, and she like changes the subject, and they never really went back to it.
Yeah, like there's 10 other ways to get out of this.
It said right there, there's 8 options, at least 8 options, and they've only considered that one, which is destroying everything else.
Yeah. They get lucky in the first. Well, I kind of like how the first 3 issues are kind of about their first success of the Infinity Gauntlet and kicking out Cap. But then the last 3 are kind of like, they do help build the series and what the conflict is, and that they show, their next incursion, Galactus knows, and Galactus doesn't want his universe to end, so he's going eating Earth. And take Terra hostage. Good job, guys. That'll work out. So they want to stop him from blowing up the Earth. It's just kind of, and it's kind of funny that they talk about being ready, and all they do is take hostages and try and stop it from happening, And even the world that you mentioned, Black Panther, says that he has this hard time destroying. It's a husk. There's nothing there, and it's. I mean, if Exiles taught me anything, it's that there's always another one. So just chill out. There's always another.
Yeah, you're right. I thought it was interesting. I didn't pick up on it at first, but like when they just chose sort of randomly to fight. What was his name? Tarnax? Is that his name?
Terex.
Yeah. Who in that universe is Galactus's herald?
I think he was before, and I think he was like
his herald.
Yeah.
Oh, he was. I'm not familiar with the character at all. I just got some weird affinity for him. I was looking through Strange Adventures, the Marvel indie stuff that they did. Hickman had did a couple pages for one of them, and one of his things is Terex. I was like, why do you have this weird affinity for this obscure character? But I lost my train of thought.
I don't know. I want to see how they write themselves out of this. Or if it's just going to be a big thing into Axis, and Axis is going to be the reboot. Because, I don't know. I mean, like you guys said before, I thought Infinity gave Marvel a great jumping off point with the Inhumans storyline, and I was pretty amped up for that. And then they didn't really take it. They just let that ball fall, and I was like, what are you doing
they
here?
kicked Fraction off the book, or Fraction left the book. I'm still so disappointed that book didn't happen. I would have been all over that. The big
problem was, I mean, as awesome as Joe Matt is, you can't put him on a book unless you have those 3 issues in the can already. You already have them, and you can move on to the next artist. Expecting him to do anything more than that, and expecting him to do 3 issues in 3 months is ridiculous.
I love Joe Mack too. That's what sucks.
He's slow, and he wouldn't be nearly as good as he is if he was any faster, Yeah, it was just that whole Inhumans thing was just such a flop. But that seemed like that should have been sort of like the crescendo, I guess, of Infinity, even though it was in the middle. And just that massive delay of like 4 months in between Infinity and like that first issue of Inhumans finally hitting the stands, it took the wind out of the sails.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. I mean, Charles Soule's not doing a bad job. I liked the first couple of issues. It just, I don't know, it didn't grab me enough to want to spend $3.99 on it,
I agree.
Anything else to say about New Avengers?
I guess, closing thoughts. Eric, what do you think? I mean, I guess just summarize what.
Yeah, it's worth going back and rereading, especially when you think about some of the current storylines. I'm gonna go back and read further ahead. My critical comments, are not necessarily. They're based on just 6 issues, and I've read probably the first 12. But I'm going to go back and I'm going to reread, and I think that there's, one of the things David said, and I totally agree with it. there's something really valuable about creators that put so much energy and planning into a comic book that you can go back and reread it, 2 years later. That talk about getting your $3.99 value when you can open up comics and you can kind of see new levels of detail and new kind of character beats or things that resonate 20 issues later. That's a pretty incredible and rare thing to find. So I'm gonna catch up.
Mhm.
We should talk about it. We should talk about more new Avengers stuff in a future one.
Yeah, well, we should do another new Avengers thing when time runs out.
Agreed. All right, Andy. So I know you're kind of late, so you can go a little bit more in depth with your closing thoughts.
Yeah, I think I kind of got a lot of mine. I just echoed a lot of what everyone else had already said. Like I said, I'm still reading it. I'm gonna have to see where this goes. Yeah, that's pretty much. I really don't have any great in-depth thoughts on this book, just because I don't really love it. But like it's worse because it's like I like all these characters, I like this concept, I like this setup, and I like the new characters they brought in, but they just aren't really paying off for me in terms of like when I finish a book, a lot of times I'm like I don't really know what just happened, and I don't really know if the story just moved any. Like what new status quo exists now that didn't exist before? And I don't think I can always say that after every issue. Oh, okay, well, this is what happened, and this is what is the new status quo.
David?
Yeah, I hear what everyone's saying, and they're definitely valid points. Every issue doesn't necessarily move the story along at like a pace that a lot of people would like. I love it. It's my favorite Marvel book. But I'm a huge Hickman fan. I've been following him since I first read Nightly News. I think he's like one of the greatest creators in comics right now.
Seriously, everybody should read Nightly News. Great comic.
Yes, it is. I have oversized. I'm like,
I like the structure. I don't mind that it's taking its time because it's.
I think a robot has hacked David's cam.
Yeah, he's turning into a Cylon right in front of us.
Oh, really?
the 12th Cylon.
Yeah, I love the book. I think it's just one of those things you either love it or hate it. And I'm just thoroughly impressed with it. I like the character work. I like the structure. I like that it's a slow build. I like the questions that it addresses. I think it's really dark, but I really like dark books like this. I give it a 10 out of 10. I'm going to follow this all the way until the end. I'm going to collect it all in trades too.
Anytime where Namor is an asshole and an unapologetic asshole and there's no redeeming quality about him, I'm happy.
Yeah.
So, this book is pretty much like everything. It's like,
he's great. Even from the beginning. From the beginning, he's amazing.
Yeah. The book was good. The art is amazing, and it really. As far as them talking about stakes. I really think on the second read, appreciating the artwork and seeing the planet explode. It kind of, on the second read, reading it for this book club meeting, it really kind of hit it home for me that this is a good struggle, not a good struggle, but this is something heavy, and it's something that no one person can deal with, and really who are they to decide that they should be the ones to make these decisions. And I thought I did a good job of doing that. And as far as a Marvel comic goes that comes out every month and deals with these world-ending issues that everyone is dealing with in their own little corners, this one is probably one of the ones I look forward to reading to every month. And I was glad I picked it. I thought it was a good pick for us that, we're all comics fans, and, this is our first meeting, and we're not really familiar with each other's tastes and what we enjoy. And I thought this was kind of a really good pick to show that, what some of us are into and what some of us can't tolerate.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's good to have dissenting opinions. And I'm glad that not all of us like this book on that.
It was a good discussion, and I thought this was there's a lot of we have some kinks to work out, but I think this is going to be fun, and I'm looking forward to doing this with you guys again. So
Yeah.
yeah. So
Next time.
I'm looking. We have one viewer, and you first.
Wow, that one viewer is probably really excited.
Yeah, first
Hi,
viewer,
one
what's up?
viewer.
And I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully others enjoy it in the archives. But we'll see you again, and next time it will be better.
All right. See you guys next time.
See ya.